The Gravel Institute, which hopes to be a leftist alternative to PragerU, tweeted, and I quote, "1 in 15 student loan borrowers have seriously considered suicide due to the weight of their student loans. This is a crisis. Biden can end it with the stroke of a pen." And somebody replied to it saying, "This was so good until the last sentence." So going through this, you're probably thinking, why the hell did you name this video required suffering, right? And I'm going to get into that. First of all, I want to break down this tweet, and then we'll get into the whole required suffering part of this video, because I'm just a fucking ray of sunshine. The critique of this post, of course, is that it's unrealistic to expect that Biden is going to sign away a bunch of debt, forgive that debt. We all know that privately he has said to his donors that nothing will fundamentally change. So this is something in stark contrast to what we figure his agenda really is. But this also, deeper than that critique, kind of shows that this is such a large problem, of course, that it's driving people to literal depression, and that this thing that has affected, students' mental health so drastically can literally just be signed away, that literally the thing that could solve mental health for this 1/15th of students is a pen stroke. Getting to the required suffering part of this, though, college has become more of a necessity of modern life, right? When I was in high school, one of the really big things that adults kind of pushed on you, teachers, right, elders, whatever the hell, is they would tell you, go to college, go to college, go to college, go to college. Hell, some of them were really pushy. They would tell you, don't even take a year break, go straight into college right after high school, which in my mind, unless you really know what the hell you're doing, is just terrible advice. Now, I can't blame these people. They're giving you advice that would have worked really, really well for them when they were a kid, but they don't really grasp the fact that the reality that Gen Zers like myself live in, it's very different than the world that they existed in, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So, college has become kind of a required part of life. And, so many people have to go into that to get a reasonably decent job. Because this is such a required part of life, college anyways, you could consider this required suffering. And that's kind of the interesting thing about the world we live in. I have looked into absurdism a bit because, when you tell people as a communist that you're depressed, they're like, "Oh yes, but have you read Albert Camus?" Yes, and I still don't feel any better, thank you. But no, we do live in an absurd society, and that is something that the philosopher Albert Camus points out, that we live in a very absurd world. And this is part of that absurdity, that we have parts in our lives that are basically requirements that have with it required suffering, right? So not even just like with college, it's just a lot of developmental things in life. You want to move out? Well, that's another kind of required thing in life that you have to do, moving out. And there is required suffering with that. Maybe you have a landlord that asks for sexual favors in return for rent. That's actually becoming a bit more of a problem considering COVID. Hell, better yet, you get kicked out because you lose your job and you can't even pay for your rent, and then you get kicked out. Maybe the place is managed really poorly. Maybe your landlord is a shithead. There's a whole subreddit for that, and I hate doom scrolling through it all the time. It sucks to see those people's experiences. Now, of course, this doesn't talk to how common that stuff is, but the fact that you, as a person who needs housing, are basically paying such a large amount of your income to have a roof over your head, required suffering, that is a half or a 30% or whatever huge chunk that you are never going to see ever, because that goes to just being able to have shelter, right? So that's another required part in life you go through that has that required suffering, is moving out. But even just something as simple as like a career, you need one to survive. You have to earn a living, because in this capitalist system, we basically imply that you don't deserve to live, that you have to earn it, that you have to work for a living, right? That you can't be, a quote unquote bum. And with a job, that required part in your life comes required suffering. You're going to have your excess wage labor value stolen from you. You're going to have jobs that exploit you on different levels. You have Amazon, where you have workers that literally pass out and die of heat exhaustion, and you end up working around the dead body for a few hours. You have articles of people who are working at Walmart saying straight up that they have like cried before work. It's kind of interesting the amount of people who have like literally cried because of their job. Like that's even more so depressing. I sometimes watch a YouTuber called Scotch, and I've looked back at some of their videos. They had one where they were working at a place for escape rooms, and they like completely fucked up the business structure, and they were all making minimum wage, and like Scotch was literally crying because like they didn't have even basic shit like antibacterial wipes, you know, for COVID and everything, and they had to pretend like they were sanitary. I'll put links in the description, don't worry. You have all of these facets of required life, right? College, moving out, a job, and there's required suffering with these things. And like, that is not even like that half of absurdity. The other half of the absurdity of it all is that all of these problems, like, they're not very complicated. Like, these are problems that like are so stupidly simple to solve. These require very basic policy, and sometimes policy that already exists in other countries. See, that's the depressing part, is we have people whose lives are basically ruined over this required suffering within their lives. And the immensely absurd part about it is not that any like none of this suffering is really a requirement of a functioning society, right? All these things can be fixed very easily. And by easily, I don't mean the political process. The political process makes this shit impossible, of course, because if voting worked, they wouldn't allow you to do it. But my point being is like the policy and the solutions to this, like they're not difficult. Like they've already been figured out. These are not things that we're still trying to research the answers to, right? Like we already know. It's just they won't be passed because it's within the benefit of the people instead of, you know, those who line the pockets of our politicians. Getting from absurdity to just hilarity, though, is like these solutions are stupidly straightforward. Like literally the first thing that comes to your head, you know, the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of these issues. Well, shit, how do we fix, you know, poverty? Just give the poor people money. You know, how do we fix homelessness? How do we do that? Just give the homeless people housing. You know, how do we help the drug addicts, right? And just give them rehab. All of these things are so dead simple. And, you know, like, it's funny, these people of different sides of politics, they try to say, oh, the left is wacky, they're crazy, you know, they want to give people free shit. But, like, you break it down to its bare components, and it's funny that people on the other side of politics, the other side of the aisle, the far right, consider some of literally the simplest and study-backed solutions some of the craziest, that we're the wacky ones, because, God forgive, you want to just give money to the poor, or give housing to the homeless, or give bread to the starving.